going back to that Manhattan grand jury, reports say that they have left for the day after hearing from that former National Enquirer CEO, David Pecker. Those same reports say the jury will reconvene on Wednesday. For more on that, let's bring in the experts. Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz, who is a Newsmax analyst and has a brand new book out, Get Trump. I got that one right. As well as former U.S. attorney and the executive director of Right on Crime, Brett Tolman. Good to see you both. Brett, I want to start with you. What, if anything, should we read into the idea that the action of the grand jury was pushed back nearly a week? I mean, Trump said he was going to be indicted. Then again, it doesn't really matter what he says. But does any of this matter?
Well, it does matter. You know, my time in front of a grand jury, I practiced for about a decade in front of grand juries, and sometimes it's run of the mill. And there are other times where if a grand jury starts to get an issue that they're focused on or a concern, and you have to provide witnesses or bring back witnesses who have testified already because they want to reconcile something that isn't connecting for them, you can start to lose a grand jury very quickly if your witnesses are falling apart, if your evidence starts to appear weak. And even though we say grand juries, they'll convict a ham sandwich, they are individuals that want to see that something makes sense that's being presented to them. So if it's not, then they may have increasingly more difficult time in front of a grand jury.
So, Professor Dershowitz, I want to pick up on this. You know, there's reports that two things are happening. One, that they're losing some of the grand jury based on some of the testimony of this Costello individual that came in, and potentially seeing some of the emails that he might have offered. And secondly, there's some talk that there might be some dissension within the DA's office. Is that potentially what's happening here, or is this just a matter of, hey, Fridays they don't meet and we're reading way too much into this?
It certainly should be happening. If I were a young lawyer in Bragg's office, and some of the young lawyers were my students, I would be saying to him, you can't do this. First of all, you cannot ethically put a witness on the stand who you know will lie to the jury. And you know that Michael Cohen is going to lie to the jury. He lied to his lawyer. He lied to the government. He lied. He's never told the truth. Suddenly, you know, a bolt of lightning hasn't come down and turned him from a perjurer into a truth teller. So I suspect there's some dissension going on within the office. But we may be seeing a remarkable phenomenon in the grand jury. Grand juries generally will indict, and that would be a ham sandwich, but normally as a guilty defendant. But occasionally you do get a runaway grand jury. Now, all you need is 12 out of 23 to indict. That's not a lot. And so even if you get 7 or 8 dissenters, that's enough to delay and stall the result of the grand jury, but it may not be enough to change the effect. Look, my book, as you mentioned, was entitled Get Trump. That's not an original title with me. I wish I could take credit for it. It is the phrase used by the Attorney General of New York and the District Attorney. They promised that if they were elected, they would get Trump. They didn't know what they would get him for, but they promised their voters they would look through all the statutes and they would find something. And then they looked through all the statutes and they found nothing. And so they had to make up crimes. And I think grand jurors may very well be seeing through that.
So, Brett, Trump has been very outspoken about his feelings on this District Attorney, Alvin Bragg. You know, he posted, at least temporarily, a picture of him with a baseball bat. That was taken down. But does this have any impact on the DA's office? Do they, I mean, I know it's not supposed to, but does it?
Yeah, I mean, they're in uncharted waters right now. And, you know, having led a large office like this full of prosecutors, you have to be particularly sensitive to what decisions an office is making. And when it's being made by the man in charge, then it is every single member of that office is going to be feeling the repercussion of that decision. I think the professor is right here. And I think the real danger, Sean, and what I am, you know, very offended to see, having dedicated my life as a prosecutor, is to see the abuse of process, the abuse of discretion that's going on. We want to know that our DAs, our prosecutors that we give the most power to, are balanced enough and fair enough that they don't just target an individual based on the fact that they want that individual to go down, but they do so based on the evidence and based on the law. And if we lose that confidence and that faith in our elected prosecutors, then we will lose a lot more in this country than just the prosecution of Donald Trump.
And I agree.
So, Professor, go ahead.
Remember that this was one of the most distinguished offices in the country. It was headed by Bob Morgenthau. It was headed by Frank Hogan. People used to walk around and say, I worked in the district attorney of Manhattan's office. I think these young people want to be able to say that, and they don't want to be looked at and say, oh, you're the people that indicted Trump on that Mickey Mouse charge. It affects the distinguished nature of the office, and I suspect there's a little bit of a revolt going on within that office. I hope there is. Yeah.
So I do wonder that. It'll be interesting. So, Brett, walk me through that. What happens if that, I mean, if that's happening right now? You got a handful of these guys, maybe they're making a persuasive case to the DA and saying, hey, Mr. Bragg, this thing's falling apart. Do they just dismiss the, I mean, what would happen next? Would the grand jury be adjourned? Do they just walk away? Like, how would we know that that happened?
Well, you know, the grand jury serves in New York for a period of 1 to 3 months. They can be extended, but that would be unusual. You know, it's not uncommon to present multiple cases to a single grand jury and have them vote on that case. What would happen here is if they do make the right decision, which they don't have the law or the facts in their favor, or they are concerned about perjury of the witnesses that they have, then they would need to certainly announce to the office that they are deciding to follow the rule of law and to not seek the indictment. Or if an indictment is not returned by the grand jury, then they're going to accept that and embrace it. And they should be going out and saying so. I hope they don't ever go to a vote, Sean, because, you know, as the professor has pointed out, you only need 12 out of 23 to get that indictment. The likelihood of getting it is strong if it's presented for a vote. I hope they make a different decision, because the facts, the law, the abuse that's occurring right now is to target an individual because you don't like him, not based on the facts or the law that supports the case.
Yeah. This may out a bang. It may end up with nothing happening. You don't have to take a vote, as you've said. It could just go away. Now, with a case as high profile as this, the media will be pressing the DA's office every day. And so ultimately, they'll have to say that we decided, but they might not say the grand jury voted against it. They may say we've made a prosecutorial decision not to seek an indictment at this time. And, you know, keep it an open possibility if more evidence comes forth. But what would that more evidence be? Making another statement?
No, we don't know. We got a lot of those emails that Costello said. Anyway, Professor Dershowitz, Brett Tolman, thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.